Reddit, what's your creepiest real-life horror story? When I was little, around 8, I hated going to the dentist. He always made me uncomfortable for some reason. I remember thinking his smile stretched too far and seemed forced, like a clown's. Anyways, my mom always came with me and went back and sat with me so I wouldn't be scared. One day, I was with my dad and he had to take me to the dentist, but tried to make me go back alone so he could sit out in the lobby doing whatever. The assistants had to literally drag me back to the room and you could hear me screaming and crying down the hall, refusing to sit in the chair. Finally, my dad came back to get me, irritated I'd made a scene. He rescheduled my appointment to when my mom would have me, and we just left. He made a big deal about how bad I was acting and told my mom she was spoiling me and all sorts of stuff. 2 weeks later, it's on the news that my dentist was charged with child pornography after molesting children under anesthesia and photographing it. My first job was as a host at IHOP. I was 16 and usually worked weekend mornings, but one day I was asked to work a Sunday night because someone was sick. Nights at IHOP back then were incredibly slow, maybe just a few customers, so I spent most of my time up front at the register just sitting around. Later that night, around closing time, I was sitting up there when I saw a man approaching from the parking lot. We had a big parking lot, so I could see him coming from kind of far away. He was dressed in all black with a black jacket, which is very odd for a Los Angeles summer. Just before he got to the door, a couple of customers came up to pay their check. He saw this, turned, and started walking up the street. This was a creepy moment that stuck with me. The next day, my father asked me if I heard or saw anything weird the night before, because apparently someone dressed in all black murdered the cashier at a KFC a block away from the IHOP I was working at. When I was in high school, I had a huge crush on a guy a couple years older than me. He was on the boys' basketball team and I was on the girls' team. I would always try to get him to play basketball with me at our town's outdoor basketball court. He usually declined. One night in the middle of winter, he asked if I wanted to come play one-on-one with him. I thought it was weird he wanted to play basketball in the middle of the night during the winter, so I had my friend come with me. She got bored quickly and he was being really flirty with me, so I agreed she could leave. He assured her he would drive me back to her house. I was spending the night there. About 30 minutes later, I'm freezing and ask him to drive me back. We get in his car and he tells me he has to warm the car up before we can go. He's on his phone for about 10 minutes and we are sitting there in silence. Out of nowhere, he starts telling me about his sexual fetishes and how he gets off on physically causing other people pain. He said that no one really knows the real him, and if they did, it would scare the living shit out of most people. I'm starting to get uncomfortable at this point and ask if we can leave. He pulls out of the parking lot and starts driving the opposite direction of my friend's house. We lived in a small town and he drives about 5 miles out of town and turns on a gravel road. He tells me he's going to take me to meet some people he thinks would really like me. He then tells me I seem like the type of girl who would like being submissive to a bunch of men, and he wouldn't even have to make me beg for it. So I'm getting really freaked out and scared at this point. I'm looking for my cell phone and remembered I had left it at my friend's house to charge. I start asking him questions to distract him. I'm finally able to get my hands on his phone when he stops at the shack in the middle of nowhere. He isn't aware that I have his phone at this point and tells me to get out of the car because his friends are waiting inside and we don't want to make them mad. I dial 911 and tell him if he doesn't take me back to my friends, I'm calling the police right then. He looks really shocked and then starts laughing hysterically. He tried to convince me this was all a big joke and he wanted to see how I would react. I held his phone with 911 ready to go the entire ride back to my friends. Once he pulled in the driveway and I got out of the car, he rolled down his window and said, "I would really appreciate it if you never tell anybody about this," and peeled out. I was 15 years old and should have called the cops, but I was young and dumb. When I was 19 and a single mother, I was working at a gas station to help pay my bills. One time, this guy came in, walked around, and then went back to pump his gas. He filled up his tank and then drove off without paying. I got the tag number, called the police per policy, and didn't expect anything to come from it because that's what always happened. Gas theft just wasn't a priority to the police department. However, to my surprise, less than an hour later, An officer walks into the gas station and asks me to identify the guy, which I did. I really didn't think too much of it. I was just happy they caught the asshole. The next day, the manager calls me really early and tells me that she saw the guy who I had identified on the news. He was wanted for 2 counts of murder. He had murdered a female jogger, no apparent motive, and the convenience store clerk that he had kidnapped after robbing her. I assumed she was mistaken because that just seemed too crazy. Something as small as what I did helping catch a murderer just seemed unlikely. Later that day, the officer came by and told me that it was true and thanked me. Without the tag number, they may not have caught him until he had hurt more women. She also told me that the reason that the police caught him quickly was the car was stolen. Then the officer told me the scariest part of all. Coming in and walking around the store is exactly the same thing he did before the robbery/kidnapping of the second woman he murdered. I will never know exactly why he didn't rob me, or worse, I assume it was because my manager was there, but I'm just grateful for whatever the reason was. This was early 2003 or so, and I'm in a small southern city, so it's doubtful it will still be online, but I will check. Edit, I found this. This discusses the case. I wouldn't expect how he was caught to be mentioned. I actually had no idea he had gotten the death penalty at all. I lived in a small college town, and my apartment complex was walking distance from the bar/downtown area. One weekday night, I stepped out on our front porch to smoke a cigarette or two. I was up late studying. I brought my textbook with me and sat down on the stairs while I smoked. When out of nowhere, a girl who I had never met before but lived one apartment over came home from downtown. She was by herself, and you could tell from her walk she had been drinking. She got in her apartment and barely got the door closed before some guy who came out of nowhere knocked on her door. She opened, and I noticed he introduced himself, which was weird because it was after 2:30 a.m. Who comes to a strange girl's apartment at that time? So I decided to stay outside and pay attention. They ended up talking for over 10 minutes. She later acknowledged how weird the situation was, but did not know how to end the conversation. He would do the creepiest things, like reach up and stroke her hair at least 3 times, and would try and slowly inch his way closer to her and the door. I made a point of being loud with my textbook so he would know I was there, and he disappeared as eerily as he had come. We called the cops, and days later they had the girl and me sit with a sketch artist. As soon as the sketch was made public, floods of calls came in. Guy turned out to be a serial rapist who followed lone girls home from bars and pretended to be a cab offering them a ride. This girl just got lucky because she lived so close to the bars he didn't get a chance to pull the cab routine. A few years back, I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45 but looked much older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her place and asked her to keep it down. She opened her door and I got a quick peek. Her walks all had crosses painted on them in different colors, and words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. It was damp, yellow-stained 50-year-old carpets, dog shit and cockroaches everywhere. No dog though. I asked her to please keep it down. She just looked at me and shut the door. Then she turned up the radio even louder. The next night, I had my girlfriend staying over. I wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow of a person next to the bed looking at us sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating, as I usually do in the dark when I'm sleepy. But then the shadow starts talking. It's my neighbor, and she's holding something in her hand. She broke in during the night, and who knows how long she stood there. "You should lock your door at night," she says, and walks out. The next morning, I hear someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. It's my neighbor talking to herself in tongue. She has a plastic bag in her hand with her rotting dead dog inside. It's hot as hell outside, and I can smell death from the bag. At this point, I'm scared shitless. She's obviously very insane. I go upstairs and knock on another person's door and ask what the hell is going on. The guy is as scared as me. Apparently she broke into his apartment one evening as well while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to get a snack, only to find her behind the couch staring at him holding a power drill. Now I know what was in her hand. At this stage, I'm basically shitting myself. I call the cops and they know all about her. Apparently she is a violent schizophrenic and she hasn't taken her meds, but they can't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns it. The only thing they can do is get her when she goes outside. I sit up for the next 2 days, waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I call the cops. They have 3 cars and a special van over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her and throw her in the van and drive off to some institution, and in less than a minute, it's like she was never there. I never see her again. Still have nightmares about her looking at me in my sleep. When I was younger, my family and I lived next to a sweet old man that was probably 70 or 80 years old. He lived across the street from us and had a big, beautiful black lab. His name was Lee and her name was Booger, and she was the nicest dog ever. Well, we used to see Lee out on his porch all the time, or in his yard, and we would always say hi, and sometimes my dad would go and have some beers with him later in the evening. Really nice guy. Anyway, here came this really hot summer. I mean hot, 110 degrees for at least a month in Michigan. We didn't see Lee out on his porch or the yard for a couple of days, but we figured he was probably staying inside with the AC, being as he was an older fella. We didn't think anything of it, and the next day we went to visit my aunt. We were gone for 3 days. When we came back, my dad went to visit Lee, and I just remember everyone being really upset when my dad came back. Like really upset. My dad was puking in the grass when he came back. Even an hour later, he wouldn't talk about it, even to my mom. I know he gave a statement to the police, and I remember seeing them taking Lee's dog away. I was crying because Booger was a nice dog and I wanted to keep her if Lee had died. I didn't understand what had happened at the time. It wasn't until I was older that my dad finally opened up to me about it. He was drunk when he did. He needed to get it off of his chest. He had never even told my mother. They were divorced by the time he told me. He said that he went in the house and the smell was horrible. Thick, almost oily, like you could feel it coating your mouth. He said that the first thing he noticed was the lights all being off and the flies. There were flies all over. Lee wasn't anywhere to be seen right off, so my dad looked around the house. He said that he got halfway into the hall and he heard a weird noise in the back bedroom, a repetitive noise. He said that he first thought that it was a clicking noise, but as he got closer it started to sound more wet. It didn't even occur to him that the dog would still be in the house, the hungry dog. He opened the door to the back bedroom and he said the stink hit him in the face like a ton of bricks. He almost passed out from the strength of the stench. He threw up right there in the doorway before he even looked. Lee was in his bed, or what was left of him. His head and shoulders were intact, but he was decaying rapidly in the heat. From the chest down, Dad said he was missing most of his flesh. His gut was entirely gone. The dog still had her muzzle in him and was working on a hole in his legs. He said that the dog didn't even stop or notice him. He slammed the door and booked it home. Late at night, on a highway in northern Ontario, a woman driving her car is relieved to finally find a gas station that's still open, so she pulls in. The attendant comes out and walks up to the driver's side. He stands there, waiting until she rolls down her window. She slips it down just a crack. "How much?" he asks. She tells him to fill it up. The attendant walks towards the back of the car and stands there a minute. The woman waits, then looks into the side view mirror. The attendant is just standing there, facing her. She's feeling pretty nervous, wondering why he's not pumping gas. Then he walks back up to the window and taps on it. "You need to open the flap, ma'am." Feeling stupid, the woman reaches down and clicks the gas flap open. The attendant walks back and starts pumping the gas. A minute or so later he finishes and clicks the nozzle back into place on the pump. Then he stands there for a moment. The woman keeps looking at him in the side view mirror, feeling quite ill at ease. She doesn't like this, being alone at a tiny gas station in the middle of nowhere with only this stranger. The attendant then walks back up to the window and taps on it. She reaches into her purse and takes out her credit card, rolls open the window just a crack again, and as she passes the card through, she looks up at the attendant. He's staring down at her with wide, frightful eyes. She looks away quickly, really creeped out, and she rolls the window back up as soon as the attendant grabs the card. But he doesn't go to the cash booth, he just stands there a moment. The woman can't bear to look at him again. Finally he says, with a voice muffled through the closed window, "Mom, there's a problem with your card. Could you please step inside the cash booth?" "What's wrong with the card?" she asks loudly, with a definite strain in her voice. "Something's wrong with the barcode. I'll need you to come over to the cash so we can make a call to the company." There's no way she's getting outside her car on an empty dark highway late at night with only that weirdo around. Besides, she realizes, as a sudden chill overcomes her, how could he know if there was a problem with the barcode if he hadn't even been to the cash desk to swipe it? The woman's breathing suddenly increases as she feels panic creep upon her. She summons up a note of restraint in her voice. "Please, can you just call them yourself? Sorry, but I'll need to see some ID. Could you please just step over to the booth? It'll only take a minute." Realizing he won't let it be, she whispers a prayer and reaches into her purse to check for cash. Yes, she has a $50 bill. Clutching it in her hand, she unrolls the window just a crack yet again and passes it through. "Never mind, I'll just pay cash." "Mom, are you sure?" he asks. "What?" she almost yells as she accidentally looks up at him again, the same wide, fearful eyes staring down at her. She looks away. "Yes, cash. I can fix the card problem. You just need to come over to the phone with me," he says. She's really terrified now and half screams at the man. "Listen, asshole, it's cash. That's all you're getting from me." All right, he responds. "Now you just wait right here and I'll go get your change. Don't move. I'll be right back." She can see him out of her peripheral vision, walking backwards towards the booth, always facing her. She can't bear to look his way. She can't imagine what he has in the booth. What if he brings it back with him? Fuck the change, she thinks, just as she realizes he also still has her credit card. She can't take this anymore. Fuck the card, I'll cancel it. She starts up the car, and as soon as it hums to life, she tears away and off into the dark night. The attendant is in his booth on the phone, breathing heavily. A 911 operator on the other end asks, "Did you tell her?" "No," the attendant responds. "I couldn't." "Why not?" "He had a knife and a finger to his lips. I tried to get her out of there, but the whole time he was watching me from the floor behind her seat." One time I went camping with some friends on a hill a few kilometers out in the woods from one of the guys' house. There's a few hiking/four-wheeling trails in the area that lead up to the hill, so it's known by the locals. It was about midnight, we had a fire going and we were just sitting around having a good time. Then the guy sitting opposite of me yells, "Who are you?" I turn around and there's this man, about 6 feet tall, staring at us from the edge of the woods with a big rock in his hand. One guy knocked an arrow in the compound bow we had. The guy across from me grabbed a hatchet and I pulled the knife off my belt. We had no clue what we were doing, but the guy wouldn't say anything to us. He eventually just backed into the woods. No sleep was had that night, and we kept a very large fire going. When I was about 10, my family of 6 lived in an extremely small apartment, 2 bedrooms upstairs and then just the living room. When I was tired of my siblings, I would sleep downstairs. One night, I am lying on the couch facing the front door and watching the sky through the window by the door, when a face shows up in the window, illuminated by a lighter. I freeze, and the face goes away. I'm pretty relieved, thinking it was maybe our druggy neighbors, seeing if my parents were still awake. But then it shows up again. I tried to scream, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out, not a sound. The person then kicks in the door and walks in the room, looks at me, smiles, and goes towards the kitchen. As he comes out of the kitchen with a knife, my dad makes it down the stairs, and the guy books it out of there. My dad called the cops, but we don't know if the guy was ever caught. To this day, I still can't sleep easily on couches. If you guys like this video, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe, and also check out my TikTok account, Scary Time. That is linked in the description below. And as always, stay scary.